Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week we will be previewing round 12 of the NRL, Indigenous round, a special round, and a lot of you may be new listeners to us. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because of the $71,000 same game multi that we posted on our page last week. If you want to hear more about that, just listen to our recap pod from round 11. That one was released on Sunday. You can find that either on the Tripod page, on any of your podcast apps, or on YouTube, and we fully break down that $71,000 multi if you want to try and create one of your own like that for this week's games. Jacob, you excited for round 12?
I'm sure a few boys will be having a chop, and we're here to
Indeed.
give you our edge and our lean and any value that we can see in all of the 8 games. Indigenous round, as you said. So have you got a favourite ever Indigenous NRL player?
Ever? All right, well...
You can have current if you want.
Current, I'll say Cody Walker. Even though he's not having a fantastic season this year, he is one of my favourite players in the way that he just attacks the line, but he's just having not the best season. But when he's at his prime, like he was early last year, he'd have to be one of the most entertaining halves out there. What about yourself?
And that segues into the first game we'll talk about. He's a late bloomer too. I don't think he debuted till he was after 25, and we are late bloomers as well. Well, we haven't bloomed yet, but we're much older than that. But I'm still hoping maybe one day. I can't go past Jonathan Thurston, but I'm taking all time. He was just in his prime. Through the years that I just loved watching rugby league, fell in love with him. Obviously a Maroons fan, and he was also kicked the winning goal in a memorable punting victory for us too. I think we had Queensland when a lot of people wrote him off in that game too, which ended up being his last ever moment in Origin. Can't go past JT, but I thought that was worth asking that little question there, just because we got to acknowledge the amazing contribution to the game that we love from the amount of fantastically, talented Indigenous players that are part of it.
Indeed, and let's move on to the Thursday night game, the first game that we will preview, and what may be the last round of normalcy that we may see in a little while with Queensland shutting their borders. But first up, it's the Dragons hosting the Rabbitohs. The Dragons are plus 4 points, the total sitting at 41.5 points, and this is a tough game for me because it's two teams that I still do believe are a little bit underrated in the marketplace. I know that the Dragons, a tough loss last week, and they lose Clune, so they've got to do a little bit of a reshuffle. Ben Hunt into the halves, McInnes back to hooker. But you do get back Tarek Sims, which I think is a good addition to this forward pack. And honestly, I thought that they lost a coin flip last week against the Sharkies. I think that one could have gone either way. If not, you could argue that the Dragons deserve to win that one, and I won't let you go on another rant about the Dragons this week, Jacob. But on the flip side, it's a tough one because the Rabbitohs, I think, are a little bit underrated as well. They were a little bit unlucky to lose last week against the Raiders. I mentioned that, a couple of those Raiders tries were pretty lucky. It was a very close game. They get back Latrell for this one, who's going to be nice and rested. Look, the Rabbits are the better team here, but it's, at St. George's home, and I certainly don't believe that the Rabbitohs are a converted try better than the Dragons, which is what this line suggests.
You're right. They both lost close games last week, which hurt. But I feel the Dragons' loss hurts that much more because they needed the 2 points even more. They're further down on the ladder to have a realistic chance of making the finals. You had to beat a rival like the Sharks, and they will feel they should have won that one. And you're right. The Dragons are a bit like me. They've got to get over that bunker mishap. And Mary was fuming at the time, but I've just seen it too many times this year where teams have been really dudded by a bad call, and they blow up about it, and then the next week they no-show. I mean, it's happened to Manly a couple of times. It's like the players can't get over it, or they find it hard to go back to work and start at square one again because they keep thinking, what if, or that wasn't fair. So they will have to live for this one. People will make a big deal out of Hunt back to 7 that, he's not a good halfback. Like, people exaggerate. He's still a good halfback. It was working well at 9, and that is a better combination. But McInnes can do fine at 9, Hunt can do fine at 7. But with the Bunnies, you're right, getting Latrell back, not just Latrell, but as you say, he's fresh. He's been out for 2 weeks. They've lost back-to-back games. If he was there for that Knights game or even last week, could have been the difference because they were very close games. And then Indigenous round as well. It shouldn't matter, but you do feel like Latrell will have a big game for them in this one. They lose Hamesele, but they regain Liam Knight, so I feel like that cancels out. And I just have a general belief that Wayne Bennett's sides improve throughout a season. This team, round 12, they still definitely believe they're going to make the 8 and maybe even do something. So I just sort of like the kind of trend line for the Bunnies, and I think they are the slightly classier side with better, better halves and hooker. So I would lay the points with Souths, and I think we're going to have a side bet on this one. Not sure if you've put it up on the screen, but I think we agreed just before to take a line of 4. So you got the Dragons +4, I got the Bunnies -4. But if people are team win, I'd be looking for that -3.5, and that was my reasoning for liking the Bunnies.
And if your team both are, I am, off a losing streak theory after losing 5 in a row to you. I've finally got one back, so looking to start a streak of my own. But sure, $200, I'll take it. Dragons +4. Let's move on to the Friday game. It's the Tigers hosting the Warriors. The Tigers are 14.5-point favourites, with the total sitting at 41.5 points. Reasons to go against both sides, or go on both sides this week, I guess. And for any of you guys that haven't seen, this game has been moved to the SCG. So not really a true home game for the Tigers anymore. You don't want to really go against the Tigers. I know we kind of say that you don't want to go against a good team off a loss with a long turnaround. I don't know if I'd consider the Tigers a really good team, but they are, they're a solid.
They're at least the 9th best team in the comp.
True. They're at least the 9th best team in the comp, and off a long turnaround, tough loss in that one. You really do think that they're going to put up something decent in this one. You get Alex Twile back, you get Luke Garner back, you lose Russell Packer and Cheekham. I think that's probably a net positive slightly for this Tigers roster. But in terms of the Warriors, although they're so up and down, you don't really know what you're going to get out of them. 14.5 points is a lot of points, and they were tough against the Roosters last week. And tell you what, if they play like that this week against the Tigers, they will cover that number. But it's really tough. They lose, both of their wingers. You lose Parsi, but the good thing is you get some instant replacements there coming over from the Eels in Alvaro and George Jennings, and they slot straight into the roster this week. So at 14.5, look, it's one of those ones where the line's too high to lay, but at the same time, we always kind of say, do you believe that the underdog can win this one? And in this case, I don't believe so.
Each week, really, with the Warriors, you're not trying to predict their ability. You're trying to predict their mentality. And you're right, they lose for Satua, Mamalo. Reinforcements have arrived, and some people might handicap this game and say, well, now some of their best players have gone home, so how do they really motivate themselves and go out there and play knowing that they don't have their full complement? But on the other hand, the reinforcements may bring a spark and bring energy as well. So, but my issue with taking the Warriors this week is also new players means new combinations, and that's always tough with a short, preparation to bring in new guys just with chemistry and stuff, as much as the players that they're getting in are decent first grade players. With the Tigers, it's just been the same story all year, that they hang tough with the good teams, but they have not gotten over really any of them. And their effort is usually enough that gets them by the lowly sides, with one exception being they did get upset by the Titans. But other than that, they do take care of business against the lower sides. At 9th place they are currently right now, which is no surprise to anybody. This game, really, if you can't win this, you won't make the finals, and you don't deserve to make the finals from a Tigers point of view. So I feel like they probably know that. You also mentioned their 2 key ins, which I think are actually 2 of their most important forwards. So I'm with you that there's reasons to talk yourself into both sides. I expect the Tigers to win. It depends how hard the Warriors fight, basically, on whether or not they'll cover the line. I don't know, so I'm willing to pass it.
Yep, fair enough. Let's move
I'm going to Ignatius Parsi the game.
Nice. You can do better there. Friday night, we've got the Broncos back at Suncorp again, hosting the Sharkies. The Broncos are +4.5 points. The total, the highest of the round. Actually, not the highest of the round. Second highest of the round at 44.5 points. I was at that Broncos game last week, and as I said, started to believe that they were a decent team after 25 minutes, and then it's been the story of the season since the restart, really, that once things don't go this Broncos team's way, and I think you nailed it on the head, Jacob, a couple of weeks ago when you said they don't really have a solid leader that can lead them out there. When things don't go their way, they hang their heads. And that's exactly what happened last week. Another pretty putrid performance. And now, this week, you have a couple of reasons not to like the Broncos. You've got Brodie Croft out, so you have another reshuffle, Milford to 5'8" and Boyd to fullback, which is a fucking worry given the points that this Sharks team has been able to put up. Sean Johnson, leading try assists, and, if any of those Sharkies guys break the line and get one-on-one, with Darius Boyd, I worry about what's going to happen to this Broncos team. And not only that, David Fifita was, I don't know if he was expected back, but it was, you were hearing whispers that he might be ready for this one. He's not. But in saying that, the games at Suncorp, the Broncos are catching points, but this Sharkies team is also not fully healthy either. They're missing Chad Townsend for this one, but you get back Britton Nakora, who's quietly, underrated. Finally, Dugan gets to play his 200th game, if he makes it onto the pitch, which he's meant to in this one. Sharks are a confidence team, and that was a lucky win, not a lucky win, but I'd say a confidence-boosting win for this Sharks team to get them, edge them just into the 8. So, look, I don't love either side in this one. I think, if I could probably catch, a little bit less points and this Sharks team was full strength, I'd probably like it. But at the same time, 4.5 feels about right to me.
I do feel as though the Broncos are the sharper side, and we discussed this before the pod, that it feels too easy to lay the lower number with the Sharks. I know a lot of you guys are going to want to do that because Brisbane's been flogged back-to-back weeks. They've, I think, covered 2 games since the COVID break, and one of those was against the Bulldogs, which, isn't too impressive, whereas the Sharks have been pulling quite a few wins. And but we're not too high on the Sharks in general. We can see that they have their flaws, but credit to them that they have been getting the results. And Chad Townsend out, I feel they can cover that because I feel Sean Johnson can take on a greater role, as well as Connor Tracy slotting in there. You're right, Nakora and Dugan. Like, you look at the Broncos, well, where is their strength if you're going to give them any credit and say they have a strength? And it is the starting forward pack. There are players that can really lay a good platform for them. But this Sharks forward pack, I have to say, is underrated. Like, you got guys like Hamlin Luele, he's probably his best season. Obviously, Rudolph coming in from reserve grade, he belongs. And then they had this Royce Hunt off the bench last week, over 200 metres, absolute beast. Talakai as well, off the bench. So they've got a bit of muscle that can kind of compete with the Broncos there. And yeah, the reshuffle again, I don't think you're going to see much drop-off going from Brodie Croft to Dearden. My bigger concern was that I heard that Milford is struggling with an injury, so now you're going to put him back in the defensive line. I don't know how that's going to go. Boyd at fullback, look, it's funny you're making the point that could be a worry defensively, but everyone's claiming that he's this master organizer and that it's going to make the defensive line that much better. I don't know.
Being nice.
Sure, it's an art form for sure, I guess, defending as a fullback, and you give Boyd credit in his prime. He knew, he was one of the first fullbacks to pick and choose when to defend in the line and when not to, and he is, he knows the game pretty well, but it's he doesn't put his body on the line in defense, and he doesn't really threaten too much running the ball in attack, so certainly doesn't scare you. And so I don't want to be on Brisbane this week because I don't know if they're going to face adversity early and fold like they have so many other times. But I'm not going to take the Sharks because it's too easy and I don't think you're getting a lot of value.
And it's funny, for those people who are probably watching us for the first time tonight, yes, we are a betting podcast. Yes, we do give out best bets and tips on the podcast. But once again, we haven't had any for the first 3 games of the round. And look, one of the reasons why we have been so successful, over 60% on best bets this year, and around 60% over the last 5 years, is because we are, selective. We don't play every game because that's a surefire way to lose your money in a hurry. Let's move on to the Roosters hosting the Titans. The Roosters are 22.5 point favourites. This one, the highest total of the round, 47.5 points. A lot of people are going to look at that Roosters performance last week and say, well, they were pretty putrid. But look, they actually got a little bit lucky to win that one in the end, especially by 8 points. The Warriors were completely up for that one. But look, the Roosters did do just enough to win that one. And I don't think necessarily you're going to have a letdown spot for the Roosters in this one after a subpar performance against, the Warriors last week and not really a look ahead to the Dragons next week. You do miss Brett Morris for this one. And look, a lot of people are going to say, well, you can slot Ryan Hall right back in there. But as we've mentioned in previous episodes, this Roosters forward pack is not the same forward pack that this was at the start of the season. Boyd Cordner out for this one as well, and that's got to be, a worry for them. He's had, multiple concussions, injury history, along with missing a few other forwards over the past few weeks. And look, for this Titans team, I think, they're going to finish the season a lot stronger than most people realise. I think they got a little bit of a mental boost last week with the signing of David Fifita. And look, that was a really gutsy performance. This Panthers team is solid. I understand it was in wet weather. You can't take too much out of it. But when you go down 16 zip, to the ladder leaders, it's very, very easy to fold. So I think that was a tough mental performance by the Titans. I expect another good performance here from them. And look, the line's probably just getting that touch too high where it's over 20. It shouldn't be.
Speaking of a line over 20, quick story time. Last week was the first line that was over 20 this season when the Roosters were 24.5 against the Warriors. Not many people wanted to be on the Warriors last week. We loved them, jumped all over them, cashed 3 best bets. But the discussion in our group was, has a line ever been this high? And people were reminiscing, and it doesn't happen many times. People were recalling the Sharks, the year they were terrible, were a 30-point underdog once up in Townsville. The Eels have when they were Spooners were, in the 20s, high 20s. I think even Newcastle once or twice when they played like ladder leaders were high 20-point underdogs. It doesn't happen much, but I want to tell you guys, 2 years before the pod even began, 2013, the Titans played the Roosters in Sydney. The Titans were a 24.5-point underdog. It was the second last round of the season. They actually were still in the hunt to make the 8, while the Roosters were top and didn't need to win to secure top. Not only did I bet on the Titans plus 24.5, I had the Titans at $13 to win head-to-head. They won the game 30-22. I mean, you basically don't even see teams paying $13 head-to-head, and I dare anybody to ever actually get on one and be able to win. So that's always going to be in my kind of personal punting Hall of Fame, and these two teams, they hook up again this week, so it's worth mentioning. I think you said the Titans were down 16-0 last week. They were down 16-4. They did get a respond try off the Fogarty breakaway, but you're right, they were under siege. I was quite impressed. They had no ball, no territory all game against the Panthers. I know the Panthers weren't full strength, but still, to hang in the game the way they did, this team has resilience. And if you're taking a team plus more than 20 points, you're just hoping they're not going to give up. And what the Titans have showed us this year, they really don't. Even though the Storm did roll them by a bit more than this line, they were fighting hard. It's just the Storm, the class prevailed in the end. So I have to admit I'm surprised how high this line is. The Titans aren't losing anybody. In fact, they gained Keegan Hipgrave. And you talk about the Roosters like Tupou is out, now Brett Morris is out, Cordner again, Crichton is out. Obviously, they lost Radley and Verrills a few weeks ago. People are kind of ignoring it. But this team is a far cry from the full-strength side that was obliterating people. And to be fair, I don't think Robbo minds. He knows it's more important to get their players right, to accumulate wins, and to peak in a couple of months' time. So while it's an afternoon game at the SCG where the Roosters are bloody hard to beat, it's a super high line, and I'm willing to go against the Chooks again.
And it definitely helps that the Knights, who are another top 4 contender, lost last week. So yes, our first bets that we are taking for the week are on the ugliest underdog of the round. It is the Titans. We're going to make ourselves a mechanical Titans plus 24.5 points. It ends up being $1.82. You're going to put your minus stake on the Roosters to win by exactly 24. The best price for that is $21 on BetEasy. And then you're going to take the $2 lines on Ladbrokes and on Neds and put your main stake on the Titans plus 22.5 points. And then we're also going to take the Roosters team total under 16.5 points in the first half. You'll find that one at $1.80 on Bet365. Let's move on to the Cowboys hosting the Raiders. The Cowboys are plus 8 points and the total sitting at 41.5 points. It's another ugly dog in the Cowboys. And look, I'll tell you right now, this is my favourite player of the round. I said last week, people laughed at me, that the Bulldogs were my favourite player of the round against the Knights. We did take them straight up to win in a Ladbrokes same-game multi that cashed. But look, the Cowboys are a pretty bad team, but they weren't horrible last week. I don't think they deserved to win, to lose by double digits. They butchered some chances. And look, it was one of the better games, I think, that Manly has played without Turbo and Walker. And look, the Cowboys get back Jordan McLean for this one. That is certainly a boost to that forward pack. But this one's more of a play against the Raiders. You lose Chance Nickel-Klokstad, who, argue with me or not, I think he's been one of their best players this season. Now, you get back John Bateman. A lot of people are going to make a big fuss about that, but he's not going to be the force that he was in previous seasons off a shoulder surgery. You get Harawira-Naera, who slots straight onto the bench, and look, he's not going to be, familiar with chemistry and all that kind of stuff for this team. And I could argue that the Raiders have played 7 weeks in a row of really tough football, including the Storm, the Roosters, and the Rabbits in the last 3 weeks in very close physical games. Now you have a perfect sandwich spot, letdown spot against a Cowboys team in Townsville, plus a look ahead to the Panthers next week. I think it's a terrible spot for this Raiders team, and I think that they should be on upset alert in this one. I think this could be an ambush.
I guess the warning would be the Roosters went up to North Queensland a few weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, and it was a terrible spot for them, and they had players scratched in the warm-up, and they were undermanned. But it didn't matter because the Cowboys were so atrocious in that second half.
And that could happen.
You're going to need a performance. Yeah. But we know there's a considerable advantage playing at home in Townsville with the current rules that the opponent must arrive on game day and fly in. So that helps. And obviously the Cowboys didn't show it last week and they were outclassed by Manly. But this is their second straight home game. They get an 8-day turnaround. That's a very favourable schedule spot. Their forward pack depth has been one of their biggest issues all season. So getting Jordan McLean back in the starting front row, that really helps. As I said last week, Hannah is auditioning for the permanent gig. He's got enough weeks to kind of prove himself, and there's enough weeks for the players to want to impress him if they want to stick around. And the Raiders, you look at their team. This is enormous. To get back Johnny Bateman, second row of the year last year, to sign Harawira Naira. Like, I was thinking if they could get one or the other, because they've kept this Bateman injury like quite mysterious. He was out indefinitely, and we know that he had repeat surgeries. So look, I honestly look at that pack now, and I think it's a pack that can win a premiership. It remains to be seen in finals games how they can compensate for Hodgson, but so far so good. You know, they've upset the Roosters and they had a good win last week. But it doesn't mean this pack is going to be hit the ground running when Harawira Naira and Bateman have not played a game this season. So you talk about match fitness, but also the team chemistry for sure. And now the Cowboys are also weak with outside backs. They're weak in a lot of areas. But you mentioned Nickel Clockstag's a big loss. And as much as Rapana is a great kind of clubman at this point, and he's very versatile, you're slotting him into a different position, not his most natural position, and he's still not the same as a kind of in his prime Nickel Clockstad. One concern I also would have betting against the Raiders is that they now believe they're a legitimate shot to make the top four, and you can't be losing a game like this one. Like the top four teams, look at them: Roosters, Eels, Storm, Panthers. You're going to have to leapfrog one of those teams. You are not going to climb above them if you can't beat the Cowboys. But I still feel this would be the kind of game Ricky would be happy if his boys can grind it out, and that's what the kind of game I'm actually expecting.
And that's all we need is for the Raiders to grind out a close win. We've got 3 best bets on the Cowboys for now. We are making ourselves a mechanical Cowboys plus 10 points. It ends up being $1.81. Once again, your main stake on the Cowboys plus 8.5 points at $1.91 on BetEasy, and a 5% stake on the Raiders to win the game by exactly 10 points. That's $20 on Sportsbet. We're going to take the Cowboys plus 4.5 points in the first half. That's $1.86 on Sportsbet. We're also going to take either team to win by 1 to 12 points. That is a Sportsbet same game multi. That ends up being $1.88 on Sportsbet, obviously. Jacob, do you want to just quickly explain how you made that one $1.88?
Yeah, well, we originally were just going to bet either team 1 to 12, which you can on Sportsbet. It's $1.83, or you can bet on Nads and Lads.
Yeah, there you got it.
Not Nads. Get the Nads out of my mouth.
Yep.
And that's $1.80, right? But then I thought, why don't I just check same game multi, and you can take the alt handicap to pick your own line on either of the teams, take plus 12.5.
Okay.
But then there's a separate market where you can just take a team plus 12.5. So you obviously take them both plus 12.5. And that's exactly the same bet, but it pays $1.88. We always do that extra work to find you guys extra value.
Indeed we do, and let's move on to the Saturday night game. It is the Sea Eagles hosting the Panthers. The Sea Eagles are plus 4.5 points with a low total of 36.5, and I think the low total is granted given that it's a massive game for both teams. Panthers trying to hold on to top spot on the ladder, and the Sea Eagles, trying to hang into the 8 there. And I think they played one of their better games, like I mentioned, against the Cowboys last week, and a lot of people might say, it's easy to look good against the Cowboys, but I think the Cowboys played pretty well in that one, and I think Manly, that was the best game they've played in over a month, I reckon. Yes, you've had to travel to Townsville, which is tough. You've got to come back home, but now you get to play at home, at Brookie. You've got 2 extra days rest over the Panthers. You've got, Brookvale is historically the best home field advantage according to Against the Spread historically, and I know that we always say you shouldn't judge a team based on their last game, especially if they had a cracker of a game. Sea Eagles did have a cracker of a game last week, but I really do believe that, they were horrid after Dylan Walker got injured and Turbo got injured. I think they've slowly been improving, and I think last week is probably more so the Manly that we should judge rather than, the weeks before. I think they have slowly been improving, Cade Cust especially. Look, this isn't a play necessarily against the Panthers. They're not full strength at the moment. I know that they, ground out a close win against the Titans last week. Don't take anything away from them. You're not full strength. It was wet conditions. I know you get Kickout back for this one, which is a boost. But either way, now Manly has Adam Fanua and Blake back. The dude had over 200 metres in fucking 50 minutes. The guy is a beast. And I think that this Manly pack is now full strength and just as good as this Panthers pack. As much as I hate to say it, you have to take Manly in this one, even though I'd love to see the Panthers win for our minor premiership bet, but the value is with Manly.
And they're plus points, so you never know. Could
Could
win both. But you're right. You're saying don't judge Manly on last week, okay? But if you want to judge them on the week before, they upset the Eels as well. So it's a couple of weeks where they've been playing well and showing they can win without Tommy Turbo. And you're right, like Fanua Blake got back into this team, and it's a good forward pack. But just look at that trio of Fanua Blake, Tapau, and Jake Trbojevic. That's the best three middle forwards, or best trio of middle forwards, I say, of any team. And the Panthers have got a couple of really good ones too, Fisher Harris and Isaiah Yeo, like that. But they've got players in form all over the park. There's a reason why they're leading the competition. In terms of players in and out, like Walker is in the reserves for Manly, but I'm not fussed whether he plays or not because how well Cade Cust plays. For the Panthers, Kickout's back, and then Coruscant and Tedavano are in the reserves. And I don't want Coruscant to play in this game,
yes,
and I don't think they should rush him back because they know it's a grueling season. Why would you bring a player back early from injury? But that would be a concern. But you're right. Like I know that Penrith are the better team, but they are still a little under strength. Like Dylan Edwards is out as well, and you've got Manly playing at home. You're getting a decent number of points. So I just think like it's a great value side on Manly. And we get the battle of the Origin Sevens as well. And if Manly's forwards can win or at least match against the Panthers, then their fifth tackle options between DCE and Cleary could be the difference in this one. And I think Manly can win or at least push the Panthers to the wire. So we've got to be on the Seagulls here.
And low total as well, 36.5. We always kind of say you don't hate taking the plus points with a low total. And you don't hate laying the points with a high total. And that's what we've got here. We've got a couple of best bets on Manly. We have made ourselves a mechanical Manly plus 6 points. It ends up being $1.88. Can have our main stake on Manly plus 4.5 with the $2 lines on Ladbrokes and on Neds. And to be honest, that's a great bet in itself. And then our minor stake on the Panthers to win by exactly 6. The best price for that is on Bet365, $17. We're also going to take Manly plus 2.5 in the first half. You'll find that one on Ladbrokes and on Neds at $1.88. Let's move on to the Sunday games. We've got the Dogs hosting the Eels. The Bulldogs are plus 17.5 points with a total of 42.5. A lot of people will think that we're going to be taking the Bulldogs again in this one after a very impressive performance over the Knights in which we had a number of best bets on them, picked them to win outright, and a really gutsy performance. I mean, they got up 18-0, kind of ambushed the Knights in wet weather, and that was just, it's a gutsy win by the Dogs, but it was perfect conditions for them. When you have a really good forward pack and terrible playmakers, wet weather is perfect for you. You can just grind out a win. This is not going to be the case in this one. It's not meant to rain for this game. And it was also a terrible spot for the Knights, a terrible sandwich spot, and they were honestly horrific in that one. So although props to the Bulldogs for winning that one, it's a bad spot for them this week. The Eels are coming off a long turnaround after an impressive win on the Thursday. And I'll tell you what's a terrible trend. When you have a double-digit underdog that wins a game and then is a double-digit underdog the week after as well. That's exactly what we have with the Bulldogs. I don't expect them to put up, back-to-back really good performances. And the Eels are contenders now. They didn't have their full complement for a number of weeks. Now they do. So I do think the Eels win this one. Last week we said we could see the Dogs beating the Knights, and they did. This week, I cannot see the Dogs beating the Eels.
It's funny you called it perfect conditions for the month. It was awful conditions, which was perfect for the Dogs. And you give them credit for the upset, but also go back a week before. They could have easily beaten the Dragons, and people dismissed it at the time. But the Dragons now, with the combinations they've got and with the forwards they've got on deck, like are actually a half decent side. So you should have kind of seen it coming with the Dogs. And one thing you do get when you're bottom of the ladder, as the Bulldogs are, you use the word ambush. Sometimes teams underestimate you. And I think the Knights did underestimate them a little last week, but the Eels won't underestimate them this week because they just upset somebody as a 16-point underdog. They upset the Eels last year when the Eels were finals bound. It kind of cost the Eels making top 4. And they pushed the Eels to the limit in round 1 this season. The opening game of the year, it was 2-2 after an hour, and the Eels got a try off a kick in behind to win 8-2, I think. The Eels are full strength, although Madison has to pass an HIA, but they get the 10-day turnaround for this one versus a 7-day for the Dogs. You got players like Moses who have come back in the team, should be better for the Rungies. Did you see that try he scored last week?
Oh, yeah.
That was a cracker. They've said that what they really want to focus on the last couple of weeks is their start because they've been down in the last 2 games. So I definitely would expect that they will be focusing on that. And the thing is, if the Eels do get up, the Dogs can't chase points. So that's why I would actually be like laying the points with the Eels, but it's just too many. But it would be a team that I'd say is like a multi-lock head-to-head and things like that.
Yeah, there's no way I can see the Eels losing that one. Let's move on to the last game of the round. It is the Storm up against the Knights, or the Storm hosting at the Sunny Coast. The Storm are 14-point favourites in the total, sitting at 42.5 points. And I've had numerous messages during the week after these lines came up. This is way too many points for this Knights team. And I can see how you would think that. Before last week, the Knights were a top 4 team after that dismal performance last week, and you do think that they bounce back, but it is kind of a worry. Look, the Storm have been awesome lately, and maybe the Knights are the sharp team here, but you have an absolute training run for the Storm against the Broncos at Suncorp last week. They haven't had to leave the Brisbane Sunny Coast area for the last month, and I really do think that the Storm are on a different level to this Knights side, especially, you lose McCulloch, you lose Connor Watson, you lose Sione Matautia, and, yes, maybe it's injured player theory and they get up for this one, but at the same time, you had a great chance to go into the top 4. You lose as a giant favourite against the Dogs, and, could they just be a little bit dejected in this one? And I can honestly see, I can see the Knights covering, but I could also see them being down by 12 at halftime and fucking lose by 30. So unlike a lot of punters out there, I don't want to take the 14 with the Knights, but also I'm not about to lay it.
You know what's funny? These teams met in round 5, and a lot of people liked the Knights. They were really in vogue at that time. They had just upset the Raiders, while the Storm were, in recent people's memory, had just been blown out by 16 at home to the Raiders. And everyone's gone, I'm picking the Knights, upset the Storm. They're different this year. And we loved the Storm in that game. We took Storm minus 3.5. It was on the Central Coast, that game. The thing is now everyone's caught on. The Storm are clearly better than the Knights, but the line is 10 points higher than it was back in round 5. And I look at this game really closely, especially when it is a rematch and, they've played only 2.5 months ago. I just don't see how this game will go much different, to be honest. The Storm are pretty much full strength. Jesse Bromwich in the reserves. He could possibly even come in. Now, for the Knights, we know they're down to their 4th choice hooker. Is Chris Randall. He did get a debut back in round 3, and he broke the NRL record for most tackles on debut. And he actually played off the bench in that game, made 71 tackles. So
Crazy. Sure
he can get through his work, but he's going to need to provide good service to Mitchell Pearce. And on Pearce, I know a couple of people have questioned his form. And there's also question marks whether he's 100% fit or playing a little busted with a bit of a knee niggle, which you don't want as well if you're taking the Knights. They've got their concerns right now. They're just not full strength. You'd love to see that Sunday afternoon matchup of Ponga versus Puppy. I know that like a few weeks ago, earlier in the season, when the Storm played well in like round 1 and 2, people would tell you Puppy was a better player than Callum Ponga, and that's not the case.
No.
But in this game, I think he might have a lot more joy just because of that forward pack he's playing behind, whereas the Knights are still missing Daniel Saifidi. So it's one where that line does seem too high, but as soon as the Storm's up like 8 and it's the second half, you're going to be sweating if you've got, plus 13.5, something like that. So again, it's reluctantly going to pass that one.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to complain we didn't have as many bets as usual this round, but to be honest, it's probably not a bad thing. We have very strong feelings about the 3 games that we are on, and, sometimes it's just best to leave the games, and there's, NBA starting up soon again. You're going to have enough stuff to bet on, so just bet on the stuff that you're confident with in the NRL. But look, guys, thanks once again for tuning in. Make sure you've downloaded the Tripod app. That's where you'll get our bets first and foremost, and you're in our Facebook group. But join us on Sunday night to recap the round, and for you AFL fans, enjoy having like fucking a month of straight AFL games in a row. But thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you guys Sunday night.
Lego.